Welcome to Blank Tape. I'm Anson, and this is a very special travel episode. Volume 1, Track 5C, the East Coast EP, recorded on Tuesday, July 24th, 2018, from Manhattan, New York City. We start off with Sarah asking us, what is the difference
between a well-dressed man on a bicycle and a poorly dressed man on a unicycle? Well-dressed man on a bicycle, poorly dressed man on a unicycle.
Only one of them is paid for being a clown?
What?
Only one of them is paid for being a clown?
No, it's a lot simpler than that. You're missing the pithy punchline.
I thought it was pretty good.
A well-dressed man on a bicycle and a poorly dressed man on a unicycle.
I'm not going to give you more food.
What is the difference between a bicycle and a unicycle?
One wheel?
You're so close, but you're just really missing the pun of it all. Elvia, what is the difference between a well-dressed man on a bicycle and a poorly dressed man on a unicycle? There's two elements here, guys: the dress and the type of transportation. Yes.
A suit and tire?
A tire, exactly.
Oh.
Nice.
That was really tough, you guys. Yeah, that was brutal. That was painful for me, guys. I don't know how it was for you, but it was painful.
Tallulah said it was a good one.
I liked my answer better.
It was not a good answer.
It was a great answer.
It was not a good answer. It was a bad answer.
Tallulah.
We're live on the East Coast with Anson here and longtime friend Daniel Moore and wives Elvia and Sarah.
And Tallulah.
Heckling in the background.
And the cats.
Oh, sweet baby.
We've, Elvia and I have been in New York for a week, staying with Daniel, taking in the sights. And taking in the sights and the sounds.
And smells.
And smells. Walking around, drinking lots of coffee, getting sore feet, and so that's pretty much the long and short of it. Daniel and I went to elementary school together, and we are both from Houston. So how long have you been living in New York?
Let's see, I moved here in February of 2010, so it's been, about 8 years and a few months. I lived in Brooklyn for the first 2 years. So I actually got a pretty good deal on the place I was staying at, and because the building was still under construction, so they had to sign a waiver so that I wouldn't sue them for things that fell on my head. Unfortunately for me, nothing fell on my head except for the significant increase in rent at the end of the 2-year contract.
That's how they get you.
But I ended up moving to East Village after that. I lived there for a few years. That was about the same time I met Sarah. She moved in, probably about...
It was December of 2012.
Yeah, I was going to say probably about 10 months after I moved there.
So is East Village on Manhattan Island?
Yep.
Yes.
All right.
It's funny because, I remember when I was new here referring to Manhattan as an island, and it is an island. But
you could just say Manhattan.
But most people, everybody who's been in New York for a very long period of time doesn't actually think of Manhattan as an island. It's weird.
You think of it as New York.
Yeah.
Because when people say, oh, where are you from, and you say New York, usually that means Manhattan.
Yeah. Well, when I took the interview to... So I was living in Dallas at the time, and I got a call from a recruiter who asked me, who noticed that I had checked a little box on my DICE profile, of all things.
Yeah.
That said I was willing to move, because I figured I might move to San Antonio. I know there's some telecom jobs there. I might move back to Houston for energy, or ideally for Austin. And he's like, "Oh, do you want to move to New York?" And I said, "What part?" Which to me, I was I think of New York and I think of the Great Northern Wilds, or at the time I did. And he kind of responds with this extremely incredulous, I don't know, downtown? There's an interesting, egocentrism.
Sarah's not drunk. Sorry, guys.
It was cat adventures.
Yes, definitely the cats.
So you're moving downtown.
Well, yeah, he's like downtown. So I was at the time very against moving to New York. All my family was from the South, and so I decided to take this series of interviews with the intent of finding the reason why I would not take a job at this company, which is an interesting approach, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Well, interview experience is interview experience regardless, so I don't blame you for taking them.
Yeah, it was also 2009 at the time, and nobody was hiring because of the somewhat recent financial crash. I had a few phone chats, and they asked me to fly into New York for an interview, and I decided that I would take public transport and really experience it for what it was. Because if I was going to live in New York, then public transport's a big part of that, and I didn't know if I would like that, given I'd never taken public transport except for maybe to like a baseball game or something before. So I flew into LaGuardia Airport. And I think it must have been like the Q33 or something like that to Astoria.
That's a bus.
Yeah.
Metro Transport Authority, whatever bus.
Yep. Actually, as Sarah very rightly pointed out at a recent trivia night at the bar, it's the Metropolitan Transit Authority.
Right on.
Ding, ding.
I thought it was transportation, but I was wrong.
Yeah, we got that right because of me.
You're right. So I think I took the bus to Astoria. Hopped on must have been I don't know which one it was, the QN or R, the Q, and took that to Lexington. Hopped on the 4 and transferred to the 4. It was about 5:30 p.m. on a Thursday night. So the 4 was packed to the gills.
Mm-hmm.
And
interviews in the morning. Your interviews like the next day, or
yeah, on a Friday.
Uh-huh.
And I've got, of course, paper map of like where I am, and packed in with my kind of carry-on bag. And there's this girl who's looking up at me like, what a tourist.
Yeah.
And I realized, I'm in this situation where, I'm definitely a tourist. So I just kind of I'm new here.
Yeah.
I got off the 4 at Bowling Green, which is the office that I was interviewing at was near there. So they put me up in a hotel that was near there.
The QNR and the 4 are subway lines, by the way. Right?
Yep.
Whereas the Q23 or whatever is a bus.
Right.
Yeah.
They were doing construction down the street, so there was the beautiful sound of jackhammers to go to sleep to. And, I remember sitting there in bed by myself, watching, I think, reruns of CSI, and somehow it occurred to me that, none of this actually was all that bothersome. That I really should have been quite repelled by this entire experience. Mm-hmm. And yet I wasn't.
Right.
I even to this day, I have no explanation for that, because that's not something I would do now.
Yeah.
I think that's part of my advice to you coming in from LaGuardia.
Is not take a public transport, take a cab, take an Uber, but don't take public transport on the way back to the airport, yeah. It's funny you mentioned that it was a subway ride that made you be reflective about New York, because it was the same for us in this trip. We got in, our flight was arriving at 12:30 or so to LaGuardia, and so we got in, took an Uber as per your recommendation to your apartment, and walked around. Went to the American Museum of Natural History, which was huge and overwhelming for our first day here. And then the next day, the first thing we wanted to do was kind of get some of the standard sightseeing stuff out of the way. So we got ourselves some Metro cards. By the way, Metro cards are very pop culture here, and so we were in gift shops, and they have magnets for various things. I Heart New York, and of course there's a magnet that is the shape of a Metro card, and has the picture Metro card on it. So we got ourselves some Metro cards from the vending machines, and hopped on a subway and rode, pretty sure it was the 1, all the way down to South Ferry, so we could take a ride to see the Statue of Liberty. And it was like a 30 or 40-minute subway ride. And before that point, we weren't sure about New York. We were like, why is this such a big deal? We have the same thing in Houston, but it's got it's just something we're more used to, and like, what's the hype about New York all about, you know? But after the subway ride, something about it, the magic of being connected to everybody who's going somewhere about their lives, the magic of being on an underground train, driving at 40 miles an hour through the dark. Something about it we thought was really cool, and kind of started us to really get, I hate to say falling in love with New York, but it's that's the experience that it feels like. You know, it's like you're here and you're part of the community, and you just kind of fit right in and make your own little niche, and it was something special. So I feel you on that one.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the other thing is that what neighborhood you're in makes a big difference about like what the feel of that community is. I guess it's maybe when I was living in Dallas, I didn't have quite that same experience. You know, so much of like my social life was driven by a car, so you can get wherever you need to be.
Driven by a car. Good one. Driven by a car. Nice.
And you know, you go wherever you need to be, and you know, I don't know. I guess I never really had a sense of like real community about like the place that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, you know, the difference between like Brooklyn and, you know, downtown Brooklyn in particular, and East Village and now Upper West Side, like there's a very, very different feel to each community, especially about like what kinds of people are there. Like East Village, for instance, every year, SantaCon, you're going to find drunk Santas running around.
Oh, SantaCon.
Yeah, SantaCon.
Urinating on the sidewalks.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas to you too.
It's a thing, right? I think as early as the earliest one I've seen, the earliest drunk Santa I've seen is at 8:30 p.m., which is pretty impressive.
That's the earliest. We saw one at 11 a.m. one time coming back for brunch.
I don't consider that. My definition of drunk in this case is like puking into a trash can.
He was peeing on the street.
See, I'm not sure if he was drunk or just
It was on like 8th Street, right by Bowery. You don't remember that?
I really don't.
I remember it vividly. Unfortunately.
Was Daniel drunk?
Part of that, I feel like, is if you're in a car and you're in Houston, you're driving through the various areas, you know, but in New York you do a lot of walking, and so when you're walking you have time to take it all in.
Yeah.
The smells and the sights and everything.
But you also run into a lot more people,
mm-hmm.
right?
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah. Well, like, you know, you definitely see a lot. So my experience was coming from, like, Dallas to New York was I actually just saw face-to-face more disabled people than I did before, for instance. And it makes me wonder, like, are there just more disabled people in New York? I mean, maybe, but probably not, right? You just probably don't see them as often.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or like people who are homeless, like you see them on the sides of streets, and you know, in some ways it's a little bit terrifying when they come and knock on your window in the car, but you have to walk by them in New York. Like, are there more homeless people in New York, you know, per capita, or is that a weird way to analyze the data? Probably not.
That makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. There are probably answers to that, but yeah. So you decided to stay and took the job? I guess.
Yeah, I took the job. I think it was a good decision. I definitely was less certain at the time, and it was weird because I was talking to not the same guy who called me, not the same recruiter who called me in the first place, but his boss. I think it must have been like 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. That was Central Time, so it must have been 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night his time. And it's funny because, like I said, like I love the company, I love the people that I met. You know, I think the work is going to be interesting. But like, what's so great about New York? And I think he was a little stunned by the question, and he said a few things. So the one thing that I remember this far later is like You know, it's like you can go out at midnight and you can get a Peruvian sandwich. And I don't know if that's exactly true, but the spirit of it is true. Like, you know, there's so much. One, there's so much weird cultural diversity that you get access to, and two, it's like stuff's actually, a lot of restaurants cater to any kind of schedule that you can imagine, right? And so it's not crazy to like say like, well, we'll go to a show and we'll see something, and then we'll get a late dinner. You know, we'll sit in this tiny little French restaurant at 11 o'clock. They're going to serve us steak frites, and it'll be actually pretty good.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that Elvia noticed early on is that walking around the city and sitting on the subway, we heard more conversations in non-English languages than we did in English. Kind of makes it seem really absurd how people in Texas are like, learn English because we're in America, and it's like, well, people get upset because there are school forms translated into English and Spanish, but being in New York, it's just so absurd that people would be upset about that because the Statue of Liberty is in the middle of the bay or whatever. You can see it. So
yeah.
I don't know. It's a good perspective, and we really enjoy being around all the diversity.
Were you able to pick out any of the languages?
We feel like we got French was pretty easy to spot,
French,
right?
Portuguese.
Various
Some Italian.
Definitely various flavors of Spanish. Yeah. Probably like German here and there, but not as much. And then various other maybe like Eastern European or like Russian things that kind of sound foreign, but can't really place it because we're not linguistic experts. And of course, like Chinese and stuff. Our tour guide today, or not the tour guide, one of the guys we saw, we did the tour of the Empire State Building. Sorry, not the tour, the observation deck. And one of the guys who was taking tickets, his name was Chris, and his name tag said Espanol and had some Chinese on it. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if that meant, I'm assuming that means he spoke Spanish and Chinese, which is impressive. But
it's a pretty interesting mix.
Yeah, not something that I would expect. But
yeah, it was cool.
So you're here to stay. Speaking of to stay, instead of when you order food, you can get it in Houston. You can get it to go or for here, but in New York, you get it for to go or to stay, which is a fun little distinction we've noticed. So you decided to stay in New York, and you're here, and we're still in Houston, but I think
we will be moving to New York soon.
Woo!
With the dogs.
Woo!
Factually, to be determined. But we're definitely interested. So.
Is it though?
No, it's not. It's happening. Next podcast episode, we will be living in New York with our dogs. So if anybody's looking for 2 cars, we're gonna sell them.
All right.
We don't need cars in New York.
May buy 1 car, get 1 dog.
That is horrible.
I don't know. I'm glad we have cats and not dogs in New York.
I'm not.
Although, my wife will disagree, but
both is always better.
I don't know. Just like there's this ventilation pipe. I don't know if you've heard it while you've been here.
Oh, I was telling Ellie about this the other day.
Yeah. So there's this ventilation pipe, and you can hear this poor dog howling in the middle of the day, right? So I was working from home today, so yeah, I definitely heard the poor animal.
I think I heard him earlier too. Yeah.
Elvia heard him this morning.
I heard him this morning. It was really sad.
I don't know. I have a fear that like if I ever got a dog, that would be my dog, and I just wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Although you would probably have some sort of like recording device or like stalking ability from workout ability.
Well, we've already got the Echo Dot, so we've already got the recording device installed.
Take an old iPad and set it up as a time lapse.
Exactly.
Or something.
But I don't know. The cats, as long as we feed them one time, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, Well, is there anything else that you wanted to share about New York? Anything special, funny, interesting that you maybe didn't expect that you found?
So, I don't know. It's interesting because, like, you know, I still have lots of friends in Texas, yourself included, of course.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I go and visit, it reminds me of kind of the very. I feel like it's a very different kind of lifestyle, like what you kind of focus on in terms of just like, you know, both like possessions and in terms of like where you spend your time. So when you have like, you know, I think we have a fairly large apartment for New Yorkers, right? It's maybe 860 square feet,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, I have one bedroom. And so you have less stuff, and so everything has to do double duty. So like this bookshelf, you know, is both a bookshelf and a wall.
Yeah. He's pointing to a bookshelf that separates kind of a little office nook from the rest of the living room.
The IKEA bookshelves are absolutely essential for any New York apartment.
You have IKEAs here?
Yeah, there's one in Red Hook, and they will deliver stuff. So I recommend you go there, you pick out, you know, about $500 worth of stuff, which is a lot of IKEA.
Yeah.
Or you can take the ferry.
You can take the ferry. It's a decent way to get there, but, you know, transporting things back in blue bags is difficult.
But there's an IKEA-specific ferry that'll take you from, I think it's South Ferry, all the way over to Red Hook.
That's
and you can just bring whatever you can carry or like on a dolly.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's the seaport. On the east side.
Yeah, you're right.
On the east side. But, you know, it also changes, like, so there's a lot more, like, kind of courier-based services. So, like, IKEA delivers, but, like, you know, a lot of grocery stores deliver these days. So you have Peapod, you have Fresh Direct, you have Instacart. And now you've got things like Food Kick, which will do, like, deliveries within a few hours. Like, Prime Now is you know, pretty helpful. And so like when you go to the grocery store, you're just buying not for like weeks and weeks. You're not, you know, doing a Costco run when you live in the city. Like even if you, so there's a Costco that's farther uptown. There's one in Brooklyn, but like even if you got there and you got stuff, you'd have to figure out how to transport it back. And then if you got it back, you'd still have to figure out where to store it all. I just don't have that much closet space.
Mm-hmm.
And so you live a little bit, you know, with less stuff and kind of continuously taking things in, putting things out before as you use them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like the benefit you get is, I think it was some random Thursday, Sarah and I were sitting around wondering like what we should do. We go see a movie, you know, just go out to eat, just sit at a bar or whatever. And, you know, Sarah was really keen on seeing the opera. She's like, I wonder if we could just go see the opera. I was like, well, that's going to be expensive. And it turns out that the opera does rush tickets. So rush tickets are same-day tickets that are sold, I think, after like 3 p.m. And it was, I think it was $25 for a ticket.
Wow, nice.
What?
Yeah. So we went and saw
The Met.
For the Met, and we had amazing seats.
Now, I had no idea what they were playing that night, but we were gonna go see like the opera for $25, and it you know, they could come out and sing like Happy Birthday, and it would probably be worth the $25.
Yeah. Do you remember what it was that you saw? Or?
It was Les Contes du Hoffmann.
Les Contes du Hoffmann.
So stereotype French, whatever.
All right.
It was a comedy. It was quite funny. You can listen to it on Spotify, and it was nowhere near as funny as the way the Met did it. So I'm sorry about that. Because there's the one kind of reprise of Klein Zach, which was hilarious in the show. I listened to it on Spotify, and it was just dry. It was terrible. Anyway, but you go see that for $25, and I think the IMAX, which is down the street from it, is $26. And it's kind of odd that we have that kind of access.
Yeah.
You can go see the Philharmonic. You know, even if you're not rushing tickets, like you can still get them for $30 or $40. And you see a world-class symphony.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. The St. Louis Symphony was doing Tchaikovsky's Fourth, which I'm in love with.
Yeah. That was at Carnegie, wasn't it?
And they did it at Carnegie. My aunt, who lives in St. Louis, sent me a note But she said, the symphony's going to be in your town and you need to go see them.
Yeah.
I probably would. I love my aunt. She has great taste, but I probably wouldn't have gone except it was Tchaikovsky's Fourth, and I can't help myself.
Yeah.
And so we got to this. We went to Carnegie Hall, which is, of course, a beautiful space, and see that very great symphony played.
Uh-huh.
It's cool that so many different places. Yo-Yo Ma brought the
Silk Road.
Yeah, the Silk Road ensemble, right?
Yeah. Well, that's like his ensemble.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he's part of it.
Well, what's the phrase? You know how you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, 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 or go to Cornell for med school?
What? Because Cornell graduates at med school at Carnegie Hall. I get it. I get it.
We have our med school graduation at Carnegie Hall. You were there.
I was there. I was in the balcony. Yeah, so getting to see Yo-Yo Ma do that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Yeah. Or for instance, when we got to see Hamilton, which is basically impossible to get tickets for. So one, they did previews at Joe's Pub, which is downtown.
I will kick myself forever for.
And then I will kick myself forever for because our friend who was a producer for Allegiance, which was George Takei's musical, was upset that her musical came out the same year as Hamilton.
They didn't stand a chance.
And they didn't stand a chance.
Didn't stand a chance.
And I very surreptitiously opened my laptop and looked for Hamilton tickets. And I saw that they were out a few months, and so I decided not to buy one, which is very dumb. But I later had an opportunity to redeem myself because there was kind of a hurricane thing that came through a few months ago, and I was thinking, I bet people are probably not able to come to this show and might be selling their tickets at cutthroat rates, and that was the case. So we got to go see Hamilton for only moderate price gouging. That was pretty cool.
Diversity and access to world-class arts and stuff is the summary of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's pretty awesome. We got to enjoy some of that. We went and saw Wicked on Broadway. First time either of us had ever seen that show, and we really enjoyed it. So that was cool. Yeah, well, I guess that's all I have. Thanks for sharing your apartment with us, and
your kitties.
And the cats.
The cats.
Thanks to the Peanut Gallery, Sarah and Elvia, for letting us record in the living room at 11:30 at night.
Peanut Gallery, my goodness.
It's just a bit after midnight now.
Yeah, Eastern time.
The night is young.
And full of terrors?
And full of terror.
All right.
Well, after we got called peanuts.
But I'm glad you guys came, and I think it's pretty cool that we get to live here, and I love sharing it with so many of my friends that that I love and don't get to see too often. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad you guys came. I'm glad
Sure.
you had a good time.
Mm-hmm. Thanks again. Until next time, see y'all.